Good morning. Welcome to this press conference hosted by Mr. Ralph Thorne K.C. MP and leader of the opposition Democratic Labour Party. This morning, we are going to have several speakers, and I'll introduce them to you in the order in which they will be speaking to you. The first person to speak to you and address you is Mr. Ralph Thorne. He will be followed by Shakwani Hunt. Shakwani Hunt is a young businesswoman, and she'll be speaking to you on the activities of young children as we move through this long summer vacation period, which many parents dread or enjoy. The second person to speak to you will be Andre Worrell. He'll be talking to you on matters of healthcare as a national crisis. Mr. Worrell will be followed by Senator Ryan Walters. He'll be speaking to you on matters of national significance and climate financing. He will be followed by Neil Marshall, who will be speaking to you on issues of labor in government. And our final speaker will be Felicia Dujon. She will be speaking to you on the current situation in the fishing industry and government's responses to that crisis. Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to you, members of the media. Mr. Thorne.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aline, and good morning, colleagues. Good morning, media. Good morning to Barbados. And when I speak of Barbados, I speak of the diaspora as well, North America, England, and the Caribbean. Since we last addressed you, the population has rested nervously as the spate of crime continues in this country. And we therefore, as a party, intend to give the issue of crime highest priority, and we intend to do that as a political party. Having said that we intend to do that as a political party, I want to respond and to dispel this notion, this statement that has gained currency in Barbados among persons of influence, among social media commentators, that crime is not a political issue. I want to say that that is false. When you make a statement, you ought to say what you mean by that statement. And to be quite frank with you, I'm not sure what the commentators mean when they say that crime is not a political issue. Crime, as we know, disrupts a society and it destabilizes the state. And the state is managed by the government. The government is a political entity, and the government functions as a political entity, broadly speaking, through two bodies: the parliament, that passes laws to control and prevent crime, the cabinet that comes up with policies in relation to crime. And that is political activity. It is done by politicians. It's done by politicians functioning in political bodies. They have a responsibility, they have a mandate to deal with the issue of crime. And that makes crime a political issue. The response must come from government. So that I want to dispel this notion that government is obligated to respond, and it is obligated to respond politically, as I say, through the parliament, through the passing of laws, through the cabinet, the implementation, the formation of policy. Now, you would have heard people saying that you cannot blame a government for crime. I don't think anybody is blaming government for every incident of criminal activity, criminal wrongdoing, violence, murder. Nobody's blaming the government. There's a difference between blaming a government and asking a government to accept responsibility. And that is the fundamental difference that one needs to appreciate. I find that the statement that crime is not a political issue is an apology for government. And it's an apology for government's inactivity. It is an apology for government's failure to properly respond to the issue of crime. And I will repeat, government has a moral, legal, and political obligation to deal with the question of crime through the parliament, passage of laws, through the cabinet, through the implementation of policy. Now, something happened within the last few days, which must be of great and grave concern to Barbadians. We heard the Prime Minister announce that there's to be some new unit within the police service to deal with crime. The Prime Minister has gone beyond her legal bounds. That is a matter for the Commissioner of Police to deal with. But here are her apologists telling you that crime is not a political issue, but this country's premier politician is speaking of policies which relate to the resolution of crime. So there's a lot of inconsistency, a lot of contradiction. But the point I wish to make is this, and I repeat, that the Prime Minister is beyond her legal bounds when she makes this announcement as to how the police force shall function. The Prime Minister does not have that power. Under the Police Act, Section 8 of the Police Act, the Commissioner of Police is responsible for the superintendence and the administration of the police force. And he is not answerable to a Prime Minister. He is answerable to the President, the head of the state. The Commissioner of Police is answerable to the head of state in his management, even in terms of the spending of monies of the police service. He is not answerable to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has no place. As I said, she is beyond legal bounds when she makes announcements in relation to how the police force will be administered. If there's anyone politicizing the matter of crime and the matter of policing, it is the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister has no legal authority to do what she did last week in making that announcement. And so I go back to the issue of blame and acceptance of responsibility. We make the point again that this country is not blaming the government for every individual act of crime. This party and this country is asking the government to accept its responsibility. But the acceptance of that responsibility does not include usurping the functions of the Commissioner of Police. That is a very dangerous thing that the Prime Minister has done. And I want to say that that adds to the situation in which the government seems to be losing the police service. There seems to be a dissonance between the police service and the activities of the police service and the intentions of the police service and the directions in which the government is going through its sole spokesperson. We would have thought we would have heard from the Attorney General. Not a word. I understand. I don't watch the press conferences, but I understand that at the press conference, he intended or attempted to say something and he was stopped in his tracks. And that is the content and style of the government. One person. And we've said this before, we need to repeat it, that the way in which this country is being governed raises serious concerns, very, very serious concerns. What is our response as a party? We accept the responsibility, and we accept a political responsibility to assist this country in resolving the scourge of crime. And what are we going to do? On the last occasion, we announced that we will establish a commission on crime, and I'm happy to say that we have made much progress with that. It is a commission, I think, of about 12 persons, including the church. It will be chaired by our eminent attorney at law, Ms. Perla de Pisa, former president of the party. She has accepted to chair that commission. If the public wishes to know what that commission intends to do, we will go around this country, since we concede that we don't have the answers. We don't have all of the answers. And the important persons to speak to are not prime ministers and attorneys general. It is important to speak to the ordinary citizens of this country who are feeling the effects of crime, who are hearing the gunshots, whose children are dying from the gunshots. We want to hear from them, so that in a very short while, we will be going into the communities of Barbados, into the school halls, the church halls, and we will be asking people to literally come and give evidence. What do you know about crime? How is crime affecting you? And the three broad questions are these: the causes of crime, the effects of crime on the community, and thirdly, what are the solutions? Three broad questions, three simple questions, nothing complicated. That is how we are approaching the issue of crime. We see that as our responsibility as an opposition party in dealing with this troubling issue of crime. So I'm happy to say that Mr. Pisa has accepted chairmanship of the Commission on Crime. Mr. Bertie Hines, former Deputy Commissioner of Police, has accepted deputy chairmanship. And as I said before, I repeat, we will be going around this country as an act of humility, accepting our responsibility and accepting that we don't have the answers, but we want to ask the public to provide this country with the answers in terms of causes, in terms of the solutions, and of course the effects of crime on us as a country. I wanted to deal also with the matter of the PAC. I came here on a previous occasion and I promised this country that the Public Accounts Committee under my chairmanship would pursue investigations which the people of Barbados feel are due for investigation. I promised this country that we would look at the question of housing. We all remember that the Prime Minister said after the budget debate that she would give some priority to an investigation into the matter of housing and into the matter of Hope, the Hope company that they incorporated. I felt, and I said it on the last occasion, that we had a duty as an opposition party, and I had a duty, and still do have a duty, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, to pursue an investigation. The Prime Minister wanted an investigation. The country wants an investigation. We feel that it is our duty, and I feel it is my duty, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, sitting as opposition leader, to set the agenda for that Public Accounts Committee to pursue an investigation. We have a fresh report from the Auditor General, I believe it is dated 26 March 2024. So this matter is ripe for investigation. I have to report to this country that last week, Ryan, or week before last, the Public Accounts Committee met, and I am not bringing any tales out of school. The public is entitled to hear this. And we attempted to set an agenda consistent with what the Prime Minister of this country had stated was a priority for her, an investigation into the matter of housing. We went there intending to place that high on the agenda for investigation by a Public Accounts Committee in a public hearing. I want to say to you, I am unhappy to report to you that the government members of that committee felt that the matter should go to a vote in accordance, I believe, with Section 6 of the Public Accounts Committee Act. And that they felt that we should not give highest priority to housing, but that we should go back to a Barbados Water Authority matter that was started when Bishop Adderley was opposition leader, I think, in 2019, and that this country must now be subjected to an old matter that was started under Bishop Adderley. The matter was abandoned because there were court proceedings. There was a court action file pertaining to that matter. It was interrupted by those court proceedings. Yet, the government believes that that is a matter that the Barbadian public wants to hear. I don't think the Barbadian public wants to hear. That is our judgment. That is our judgment. But they outvoted us and they said, let us go back to that old BWA report. I doubt Barbadians remember it. I doubt Barbadians know too much about it. We wanted to give highest priority to the matter of housing so that their decision and their position, using their majority status on that committee, is that we must go back to that 2019 report and investigation. And they have said, to be honest, that the housing report would have to come second. Now, the public must now ask, the PAC some serious questions. And in asking the PAC under my chairmanship some serious questions, they must also ask the government some serious questions. What is it and why is it that the Public Accounts Committee, that the government does not want to hear an investigation into housing? I'll tell you this about housing. I was absent from Parliament on Tuesday, unavoidably absent. And the government went there and acquired or vested lands, I think at Pilgrim Place in Christchurch. And I was very curious to find out into whose name they were vesting these lands. During the budget reply, I lamented and expressed regret that the government was now taking up precious lands and vesting them in a private company. And I insist Hope is a private company. They call it public-private sector partnership. It is a private company. It is run by private individuals. It behaves like a private company. Its salaries are set up to $30,000 a month. It is set within that private company. It has a relationship with the cabinet in which the cabinet had picked up $60 million and gave them for a project that has failed, it has faltered, it has collapsed. So on Tuesday, I was curious as to which company, which entity would have these lands vested in it. I complained during the budget debate that it seemed as if the government was marginalizing the National Housing Corporation, which had served this country for close to 70 years as a builder, as a landlord, as a manager of public estates, public housing. And it had been abandoned in favor of Hope. For all intents and purposes, Hope has collapsed. And I think what happened on Tuesday in Parliament is a concession on the part of government that Hope has collapsed. They have now reverted, having vested 478.2 acres of lands in Hope. They have now reversed from that position and they have crawled back apologetically to the National Housing Corporation. So the very thing that they abandoned, they have now gone back to it. What has happened to Hope? Has Hope collapsed? Why has the government abandoned Hope? And if the answers to that question are that government has abandoned Hope because it is now crippled, having taken up $60 million of the taxpayers' money and squandered it, tell us why they have gone back to the National Housing Corporation, and more importantly, tell us why they're not allowing the Public Accounts Committee to investigate Hope. Tell us why the Barbados Water Authority investigation, which dates back years, which is now spent. Tell us why that is given priority over the matter of Hope. Tell us why government, tell us why Hope is being placed on the back burner. Tell us why they don't want Hope investigated. As I said earlier, I repeat to the people of Barbados, we have a fresh report from the Auditor General, 26 March 2024. It is the freshest of the reports that are before the Parliament. It is ripe for investigation. I can say here and now, it appears as if government wants to delay on that investigation, although the Prime Minister, back at budget speech time, said that she wants to do an investigation. This government has some questions to answer, and the question they must now answer: why do you not want to give priority to an investigation into housing and an investigation into Hope? I treat it as my duty as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee to report back to Barbadians. I treat it as my duty as opposition leader to sit in a position where I can exercise a discretion as leader of the opposition of this country to reflect the wishes, the views, and the intentions of the people of Barbados in determining how their monies are spent. The people of Barbados want an investigation into that $60 million. The people of Barbados want an investigation into the manner in which Hope and the housing people have been functioning in relation to hard-earned taxpayers' monies. I want the press of this country, because the people are asking, I want the press of this country to ask the government why they cannot now give priority to an investigation into the matter of housing. As I said, and I repeat, government appears to have conceded on the issue. They appear to have conceded on the issue, and they have crawled back apologetically the National Housing Corporation, as recently as Tuesday in Parliament. So that is where we are with the PAC. I regret to announce to you that I thought that I had a discretion to determine what matters should be up for investigation. I sit there not as a regular member of Parliament. I sit there in opposition to the government and in constructive opposition to the government, so that government should not then come there and determine what matters should be investigated. Government cannot determine what matters should be investigated. Government and the members of that committee should sit and allow the leader of the opposition and the opposition, broadly speaking, to represent the interests, the views of the public and pursue investigations that are right. Let the public ask and let the media ask the government, why do you not want to give highest priority to the matter of housing? That is where we are with that PAC matter. I think we meet sometime again in September. And between now and September media, I want you to ask the government why the matter of housing was relegated on the agenda of the Public Accounts Committee. Why are you now using the law to force a leader of the opposition to defer a matter of housing in favor of a spent matter of a Barbados Water Authority report? And I say this again, I say this now as a matter of fact, that since that BWA matter, there are other matters which came up under Bishop Adderley's chairmanship of the PAC. They don't want to deal with those. They didn't mention those. But curiously, they want to go back to, I think, 2019 matter. And as I've said, by now everybody in Barbados knows the sub judice rule. When a matter is before the court, you defer, you cease to act. But somehow they want to bring and breathe life back into a matter that is currently still before the court. It is still on the court record. It has not been resolved. No decision has been given. But please let the government explain why they do not wish a Public Accounts Committee of your country to investigate the matter of housing. And in addition to that, I repeat, please ask them why on Tuesday they went back to Parliament and crawled back to the National Housing Corporation for the vesting of lands. Where is hope today? Is it abandoned? Is it crippled? Has government acknowledged that it no longer serves any useful purpose to Barbadians? And if that is the case, if you've abandoned hope, why can't hope be investigated? So that is my introduction to this media conference. As I've said, our style and content is that these conferences will be done not by me sitting alone, but with a team. It is not our style and content to come to the media and to come to the people of this country, and when colleagues try to speak, you shut them up. We don't do that. We don't do that. We are offering this country the broad expertise that is available to the people of this country. We have an outstanding team here this morning, so you don't have to hear my voice alone. These are not mannequins. These are real people and future representatives in a government. Yes? So I pass back to Ms. Aline, and Ms. Aline will conduct the order of business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thorne. We now move on to Shakwani Hunt. She's a young businesswoman, and she'll be speaking on the topic, as I told you earlier, the activities of young children as they move through this long summer holiday. Shakwani, over to you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, right, a lot of us understand, one, what it feels like to be home on long vacation. We all went through that process. Some of us will have children going through that process currently. I want to thank the government for starting back the summer camp program, because we know how necessary they are currently in these times where children are at home doing nothing. And when they're at home with nothing to do, They can get into dangerous matters, they can get involved in crime, they can get misled. On to my real issue. We need to ask parents to come on board with us with monitoring the excessive time children spend on devices, whether that be cell phones, computers, or tablets. I understand that the tablet and the cell phone has become apparent in the relationship between children and their parents. Yes, work is busy, the activities from work is busy, coming home it is busy. You still have to parent, you have to wash, you have to cook, and sometimes you need that additional help. I remember being young and going outside after school and playing, but the times were different. It was safe to be outside. Well, it was safer to be outside. Now I know on some parents' minds they are worried about your child getting hurt, possibly gunned down. There's a lot to worry about, and you feel by giving them a device, it is like a safe haven. Like you are protecting them because they're inside, but also you're putting them at risk. You need to consider that excessive times on the screen, you are putting them at risk for additionally needing glasses because as adults when we're on the screen too long, we have issues with our eyes, we have headaches, we have issues concentrating. So imagine a child who is way smaller, way younger than you. How are you expecting them to navigate dealing with these issues when you as an adult have difficulty dealing with it? At work, sometimes you're asked to take 15-minute periods off the screen, get up and stretch. But with no one monitoring children, giving them limits on these devices, nobody is protecting them in that way. We need to remember that there's a limit for a reason because prolonged screen time can have long-term damages. I know of a situation where a parent had a child who was fully verbal and the child regressed because when they started to investigate, they realized that the child was watching shows where the characters weren't speaking, and the child started to not speak and mimic the characters. Something as simple as that may seem harmless and safe because it wasn't a violent show, but it caused the child to step back. They weren't able to speak, they weren't able to advocate for themselves, they went back to pointing. So you had your child who was basically on track in their life, and you thought that they were ahead of the wheel, and then you found out you couldn't understand what was going on. The pediatrician couldn't understand what was going on, and then you, as the parent, had to do your due diligence. I'm saying this because when we allow devices to parent children, we relate to many situations like this. I know this cannot be the only one because if you look at your child and you can see children who would have been able to advocate or articulate better after spending prolonged periods of time on the devices, they will pick up the lingo. That is where you find small children who watch series like Peppa Pig have English accents, even though they have never traveled out of the country, because they are mimicking what they're seeing. When you don't monitor them, when you do not put on parental controls, you will find there are videos and links embedded on YouTube that come out as children shows that aren't children shows. You will see adults on these shows, and that is why it's very important to monitor what your children are doing. I am 100% behind getting your child to be more active outside. Yes, it is more work. Yes, the sun is hot. Yes, you are tired. We are all these things as well. But I am encouraging you to do this because a pair of glasses I know is starting no less than $700. So think about it. Children grow every single year. So imagine $700 by the time they're 18. You also have a good piece of money. And that has nothing to do with blue filter glasses because as adults, we get that to work on the computers and our devices, but nobody's considering that children may need that for using their tablets and devices. Think about how many children suffered with headaches, not being able to focus, not being able to pay attention in school when we were doing online classes during COVID. I know they would have said that all online classes were excellent, but you can tell that it wasn't as excellent as everybody made it out to be because you have a host of children who cannot read, who cannot write because they didn't have time to practice. It's very difficult to write on a tablet. Like we all know how to utilize stylus, but it's not the same as using a pen or pencil. Trying to parent using devices is going to be a challenge. Yes, there is a blessing, but there's also a negative because we need to be on top of the timing for how long we set our children to be on these devices. What is enough time? What is not enough time? I remember when I was in secondary school, when I came home, I had 1 hour on the computer. After the my studies, 1 hour. Everybody had a lot of time. So if I had 1 hour, why are we allowing children to spend 6 and 7 hours on devices knowing that it can damage them? I know that it's very easy to come home and hand them their phone in the car or hand them their tablets when they get home because you've had a long day, you need to go through homework, you need to decompress. But it's also putting them at risk for things like I mentioned before, regression, acting out at school. Because think about when you take away a device when they are acting out, how much worse that behavior gets because they don't know how to manage their emotions as yet. So they're thinking that, well, I have it all the time. Why can't I continue to have this device? So we need to work along with the government to setting parameters to control the timing. We need to reach out to the psychologists and the social workers to ask them what is the right amount of time for a child to spend on a device because they have the answers. We don't need to recreate the wheel. We just need to include them in the conversation because they already know. They can tell you that they have so many more children being diagnosed with ADHD, all kinds of disorders that they can't understand why this generation is being impacted in this way. But we have to look and see what did we do different when we were younger compared to what they're doing now. I told somebody I remember being younger playing Grand Theft Auto. I didn't grow up to want to harm anybody in that way, but I also didn't play for 5 to 6 hours. The most we played was probably an hour, and then we had other activities in the household to do. We brought back in board games. We interacted with our parents. I remember my mother had this goal as a child. When you came home, homework was a must. We had a time period to work puzzles, do coloring books, do activities as a family. I only watch television on the weekend. I know that sounds difficult like a person, but I am thank I am thankful that she gave me that opportunity because you'll be surprised that not being able to articulate or dissolved anger at that age would be so necessary. When you put children in front of a tablet, you're asking the tablet to watch them, to monitor them. You're not setting the parameters where the parent is being included in the session where they're on the devices because maybe if some parents can join the children in these time periods, but we definitely need to reduce the time because if you're thinking back to when you use your devices, you have headaches, you feel unwell, you start to feel sick. Think about your small child using that device and how it would impact them and how it would impact them long term. So we need to start looking into that more and remembering that we have limits for using the phone because back then it was a landline way at home. You had to wait to get access to use MSN. So if we had a limit by our parents who knew nothing about technology, why we now we're in positions where we know more about technology are allowing our children and our family to use it without parental control and without limits. We set limits to help control and organize boundaries so children understand okay, you do your chores, you can use your tablet for an hour, and then you have to do your homework, you have to set something because when you just give them unlimited time, then you create an issue where they think that, oh, at any time in the night they can use their tablet. I know parents who've been complaining that they're waking up in the time finding children on devices. They put it in devices and the children are climbing up looking for the devices at 2 a.m. Why is a child on the device at 2 a.m.? That we have real issues that we need to contain before these children get older because you're thinking about 11 plus, but I'm thinking about children going into reception who are already on devices. I had to wait to full form to get my first real cell phone. So I can't imagine giving a child a device at such a young age and allowing them autonomy to use it whenever they want to. I don't feel like that is something that we need to do. We need to set boundaries so that they understand how it should work, and that way we'll be able to control and help some of this aggression that comes with taking away the devices. I think that today we have started a conversation that must continue because this is only the beginning. We have identified that this is a part of the problem. We're going on to rooting out how we can find solutions and who we can involve in this process. And I just want to say thank you very much for having me today to speak on this.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Shaquani. We move on now to Andre Worrell, the acting president of the Democratic Labour Party, and he'll be speaking to you on healthcare as a national crisis. Andre, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aline, and to the leader of the opposition and political leader of the Democratic Labour Party. It's a pleasure for me to speak to you this morning on healthcare. And basically, we are in a country where healthcare has become a national crisis. This is due to every day there is a shooting. They've gone to stabbings now. This obviously puts a burden on the healthcare institution, not only the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but the polyclinics as well. So you have the issue of crime impacting on healthcare. The hospital is also facing issues, not just the hospital, but facing issues with manpower shortages. Many of our doctors and our nurses are leaving, trained professionals are leaving, and this impacts on the care at the hospitals, not only at the QEH. We hear a lot from the QEH because of the communication specialists there. We don't have communication specialists at the polyclinics, so we often do not hear the complaints of the persons who visit the polyclinics on a daily basis, don't get to see a doctor because there's only one doctor working and there are hundreds of people there and the wait is absolutely too long. You visit the pharmacy, there's also a shortage of supplies as well. You visit the pharmacy, you cannot get your medication. You're told you have to come back, it's out of stock. That means you may have to use a $3.50 or pay a taxi to get back to the pharmacy to collect your medication. All of these things are impacting on healthcare in Barbados. You have persons in Barbados who have been waiting for more than a year, some people even before COVID, for surgeries in Barbados. One, because you do not have the equipment to perform these operations. Two, many of the doctors who were trained at the QEH became frustrated with the system and left Barbados and gone on to greener pastures. The nurses as well, frustrated with the system, issues with pay, the way how they are treated, and being completely overburdened by all of these things, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. And if you have an accident, an emergency, where you have 40 people waiting for treatment, and then you have to stop to deal with a shooting victim or someone who was stabbed, that obviously increases your workload. So we have to realize that we are facing a national healthcare crisis in Barbados. And what is the government of Barbados's priority right now? They're in the IMF program, and we have seen that their priority through that program has been to reduce the expenditure, and we have seen how it is hurting healthcare delivery in Barbados, and also to increase revenue by making persons pay for some things which were done before covered by the state, in terms of persons coming into the hospital for prenatal care now have to pay for ultrasounds. These things should not be happening in Barbados in 2024. Persons not being able to get not only the ultrasounds but use the CAT scan. You have a waiting list miles long, not even just in terms of time, for these equipment within the healthcare system in Barbados. And these things need to be addressed. We cannot just be satisfied to get the ticks from the IMF saying that we have met their targets when the people in Barbados are suffering and people are dying, and you don't feel comfortable having to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to seek health care. You see it as a death trap. When that ambulance has to come for you to take you to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, you don't die because of the sickness. You oftentimes die because of the length of time you're waiting in accident and emergency to see a doctor, to even to see a nurse, because our healthcare system is overburdened. And we are asking the government to put the people of Barbados first and address these issues. We have an absence of the Minister of Health. We had one good, well, she wasn't the Minister of Health, but when Dr. Brown was there, she was the Minister of State in the Ministry of Health. She spoke more on the healthcare issues in Barbados than the substantive minister who was still there speaking, Dr. Jerome Walcott, and then the demoted minister who is a square peg in a round hole, who has not yet recognized, well, got over the shell shock that he has been demoted and is in an area where he does not necessarily have the competency. We cannot have a government that allows the press, the media, the communication specialists to speak for them. The people of Barbados did not vote for that. So as much as we appreciate the messages from the communication specialists at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital telling you not to come to accident and emergency, it is not addressing the problem and it is not helping Barbadians, because Barbadians need to know what to do. QEH is overburdened because the polyclinics are not there to take up the slack. And we need to hear the Minister of Health coming to the people of Barbados to address these issues. How are you going to put more healthcare workers in place? You have a situation where nurses did training at community college. And because of the regional exam, which a number of the nurses who came into Barbados were not subjected to do, because of that exam, these persons who are trained as nurses are not allowed to practice in Barbados. But we accepted a flood of people who did not have to do that exam, and a number of nurses from throughout the region don't have to do that exam. So you have trained, qualified nurses in Barbados who are sitting at home, who could be working within the healthcare sector to ease the burden, but who, because of that exam and the government not making provisions for them to come into the healthcare sector to work, there are either minding children. Yes, they have nurses who are trained as general nurses who are now working in elder care centers, not necessarily utilizing their full skill and their capacity, but these persons can be put to work immediately in the healthcare sector in Barbados, because you have trained AKU nurses who are leaving, and you know the number of persons in Barbados who since COVID have had to get treatment for dialysis. And you have trained AKU nurses, and a couple of weeks ago, the AKU was shut down for a period of time because of unavailability of supplies. A government that put its people as priority will make sure that these things are there. You have persons who are waiting on a long list, and you have people who are trained who are not allowed to get into the system, and you're frustrating the ones who are already in the system, who are looking to move to USA and the UK the same way that the Ghanaian nurses use Barbados as a stepping stone to get from Ghana to Barbados, then on to the UK and the USA. Our nurses here are doing it, and I am glad to see that we can send persons overseas. But at the same time, what are we doing to encourage more of our young people into training and get those who already have the training into the jobs? Those are the things that we need to hear addressed by the Minister of Health. The communication specialists cannot touch these issues. We need to have the Minister of Health taking on his responsibility and addressing these issues. And finally, we have been paying a healthcare levy for years. Are we satisfied that we are seeing that money being spent within the healthcare system in Barbados, not just the QEH, but also the underfunded polyclinics, the outpatient clinics as well, and all of the other healthcare service in Barbados, the drug service? You have critical issues with not having access to certain drugs. I know that the major drug suppliers in Barbados, they do try to work with the government, but they have been waiting for substantial long periods of time to get payments for drugs which the government has taken for a long period of time, and they're waiting for payment. All of these things affect healthcare delivery in Barbados, and we need to hear this government. So don't send the communication specialists to deal with PR. Deal with the bread and butter issues that are affecting the life of many people. There are many people in Barbados since COVID, the non-communicable diseases and are increasing. The stress is increasing, the crime situation is increasing, and we have no confidence in our healthcare system because it's at a national crisis level and it needs to be addressed and it needs to be fixed. And if this government does not know how to fix it, well, seek advice from a party in waiting who is more than ready and waiting to take up the mantle to fight for the people of Barbados and look out in the interests of the people of Barbados. All of us need a proper functioning healthcare system. If you go to Bayview, they may still have to send you back to QEH at the end of the day because it's our number one facility that is capable of handling all of the medical crises that you may have. So fix it and get it right. We are asking the ministers to do what the people of Barbados elected them to do. Speak to the issues affecting the people of Barbados and not the cosmetic issues that you send the PR persons to deal with.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Worrell. I now introduce you to Senator Ryan Walters. He will be speaking to you on matters of national significance and the issue of climate financing. Senator Walters.
Good morning to fellow comrades and to our viewers at home and to the media. There are two specific issues that I will deal with today. The first one has actually taken over the media this morning as relates to what happened in the Senate yesterday. I don't think it needs to take up too much of our time, but just to put a couple of facts out there that maybe not be known to the public and to the media as well. So this issue that has been highlighted, it precedes me and it precedes Senator Watson. There's evidence that previous senators and current senators either raised these issues in the past or supported the senators that raised these issues. And there are two main issues: scheduling of bills, which is what is to be debated, and two, when those bills are to be debated, and two, the abuse, if I may use that word, the abuse of the suspension of Standing Order 45-2 that allows the chairman to read a bill the second time. And when you read a bill the second time, it triggers the debate. But so generally you read the bill the first time and the Standing Order gives you 5 days before you can read the bill the second time, which allows then for persons to read the bill thoroughly, to do research and to get all their supporting documents, to offer a good debate and a good discussion around the bills so that you can have a fullest debate and persons of Barbados are satisfied with the content from all different perspectives. So there's kind of abuse to suspend that standing order in an effort to pursue specific bills. So those are the two main issues. And previous senators, both on the opposition side and on the independent senator side, had issues with these. And I'll read a letter that was submitted to the Honorable President of the Senate by the independent senators. And this letter was signed, my information tells me, by all independent senators. And this letter is dated the 13th of December, 2022. Allow me to read it because it gives us the substance of the issue and it tells you that this is not a personal issue. This is not an issue that the DLP has only been having. This is an issue of governance of the Senate by how the mishandling of the leader of the government business in the Senate and the government itself. Dear Mr. President, I write respectfully to raise a concern about the manner of adjournment and callings of sittings to the Honorable the Senate. While I understand that it may not always be possible to fix dates for sittings, the current manner of adjourning does not allow for appropriate planning of one's time. The ad hoc approach currently being employed fails to appreciate that senators have professional and personal duties to which they must attend. The emerging practice of alerting members of potential meeting dates at the point of adjournment of the Senate has been slightly helpful. However, The tentative nature of such scheduling does not facilitate proper planning of one's responsibility to allow for attendance of sittings. Further, the practice of providing formal notice just 3 days prior to a sitting, often on a Friday for a Wednesday sitting, seems inadequate for the conduct of rigorous research and preparation for the discharge of the important legislative functions of the Senate. The most recent notice, delivered via email on 12th of December for a sitting on the 14th of December, just 2 business days before the sitting, is particularly concerning. Mr. President, concerning the foregoing, I respectfully ask that more attention to be paid to scheduling in ways that are more appreciative of members' time and the need to prepare appropriately for the serious business of the country's legislature in service of the people of Barbados. Finally, it is hoped that the Honorable the Senate considers establishing a parliamentary calendar of sittings as is customary in other jurisdictions. Yours sincerely. This was signed by a senator, and my understanding it was also signed by all independent senators of the Senate at that time. So, to the media and the people of Barbados, do not be misled by some of the comments that you have seen in the media this morning. This is an issue that needs to be rectified. There is this in the order paper. This business falls in the category of the public's business. The public's business, not the Barbados Labour Party business. The government of Barbados must do better. The leader of government business in the Senate must do better, because it is the people's and the public's business that senators come to the chamber to do. So I think that is it. I just wanted to make it clear that it is not a Senator Watson issue, because she raised it in the last sitting and she raised it in this sitting. It is not a Democratic Labour Party trying to cause noise and confusion in the Honorable Chamber. It is a problem that since 2018, the Senate has been having from opposition senators and other independent senators that sit in the Senate as well. But to my substantive contribution this morning, we have had a lot of discussion in Barbados surrounding what we refer to building resilience against climate change. And I know a lot of Barbadians are getting weary of the term resilience and climate change, and everything is kind of angled back and directed back to this whole phenomenon of climate change. I don't agree that right-thinking Barbadians, the Democratic Labour Party, definitely does understand the importance of climate change and the impact that climate change will have. We hear about the erosion of the seas, the sands. We hear about the renewable energy. We hear about how hot the days are. We know and we understand and we appreciate that there has to be a response from government. But missing from this conversation, we have not really understood, or we have not really gotten from the government what their response has been. They talk a lot about resilience, and they talk a lot on the national front. They talk a lot on the international stage, but they've been doing some things behind the scenes, and I know Barbadians have not really gotten the full sense of what this government has done from the perspective of financing sustainability as it relates to building resilience against climate change. So I just want to share some of those things that have been happening since January 2023 to present as it relates to financing of building resilience against climate change in Barbados. Now, in September of 2022, a press release from the IMF came out, and it said that Barbados was the first country to reach a staff level agreement to assess the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Now, the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust helps low-income and vulnerable middle-income countries to build resilience to external shocks. and ensure sustainable growth, contributing to the long-term balance of payment stability. It complements current IMF portfolios as well. So I think you have to be in an IMF program to get this kind of support. But it also talks about this staff level agreement in which Barbados will get access to Barbados $366 million under this RST. $366 million under the RST, and another 220 million Barbados dollars for as extended fund facility. So I turn now to the Central Bank report of 2023, just to see if we've drawn down on this money. Barbados, based on this report, has received $151 million from the Resilience and Sustainability Trust in 2023. Barbados dollars. I converted everything to Barbados dollars, so it'd be easy. $151 million. And I quote from the Central Bank report, multilateral institutions were the main sources of foreign financing for the government. During the first 9 months of 2023 to 2024, policy-related loans amounted to $427.6 million. The IMF Extended Fund Facility and the Resilience and Sustainability Facility contributed $227.6 million, with $151.7 million earmarked for climate resilience. On June 28, 2024, the IMF issued another release for a review of financial performance of the economy. And in that release, we have immediate access now, the government of Barbados, to additional $74 million from the RST. So we have $151.7 million from 2023. Year to date, $74 million, $225.7 million in total from the IMF, from the RST, Resilience and Sustainability Facility of the IMF. Funding obtained from the government of Barbados to fight against climate change. In January 11th of 2023, the World Bank approved 200 million Barbados dollars in financing to support Barbados's low carbon economic development and resilience to climate change. And again, I like to bring the quotes and the references to support what we are saying, because persons get the feeling that we are out here on a witch hunt. Our duty is to bring facts to the people of Barbados and support our facts. This is not emotions, like how some people want you to believe. And on that occasion, the Prime Minister is on record of saying, I cannot underscore enough the necessity of support such as this to middle-income, small developing states. This loan allows Barbados to advance its efforts to achieve climate resilience, including continuing our shift to clean energy. This ultimately allows us to better shield Barbados from the worst excesses of the climate crisis, while creating opportunities for green and blue jobs and investment as we adapt to our new reality. That is $200 million from the World Bank. On March 7th of 2024, announcement from the Inter-American Development Bank that Barbados has signed an agreement for Barbados $100 million to boost coastal resilience against climate change. Mr. Opposition Leader. The IDB president said the coastal area in Barbados remains an essential asset for economic activity, but also increasingly vulnerable to climate change. With this project, we are supporting the development of an integrated and sustainable coastal zone that also ensures that people with disabilities and women have safe and secure access to coastal areas and beaches. the Prime Minister said that Barbados and the IDB have been working together to combat the deleterious effects of the climate crisis for over 40 years. Today, this partnership continues and shows one more time the shared commitment to climate resilient investments and to support vulnerable countries. I continue on. On June 6 of 2024, the government of Barbados signed a loan. It was announced that they signed the loan, I think it was about last October 2023, with the United Kingdom Export Finance Agency, 773 million Barbados dollars. 773 million Barbados dollars. Low cost loan from the British government to bolster its climate resilient efforts and economic sustainability in Barbados. That is Minister Ryan Strong. In summary, between January 2023 and June 2024, 18 months, Barbados has gained access to $1.3 billion.
Barbados?
The Barbados government has gained access to 1.3 billion Barbados dollars to help with climate resilience and build and mitigation. IMF, 225.7 million. We know that that is in Barbados based on the mouthings and the central bank reports. $100 million from the IDB, $200 million from the World Bank, $773 million from the United Kingdom Export Finance Agency. I reiterate, we understand the importance of building resilience, but we need to have an account for the money, because we need to see the build-up of the resilience. Where is it going? How much is being spent in consulting fees, in actual infrastructure? And we're not being facetious here, because if projects have not started, identify those projects, identify the cost of those projects, identify the timelines for those projects, the duration of those projects, what is being allocated to those projects. We need transparency, because there's still a balance sitting in the IMF to come, and I'm sure that there will be more deals to be brokered as we campaign internationally about climate resilience. So I know this is an Olympic year, but Barbados has to have the record in the amount of money they could borrow in 18 months as a small island development state to build resilience. $1.2 billion, and what do we have to show for it? We can support it as a party. I am sure the public will support it, but we have to see what we are supporting. Have to give an account for this financing that we have obtained. So I don't see the fight for climate change as a sprint. It has to be a marathon that is thought out carefully. Then tomorrow, which programs to get involved in, who to partner with the programs. And this is the sort of conversation that we're missing from this whole resilience conversation, and the notion that Barbados has to be resilient. But before I conclude, I would want to say that this $1.3 billion actually does not include some of the other major projects as relates to the renewable energy and as relates to building resilience, because we have the Green Climate Fund. And there are projects in the Green Climate Fund that total another $528 million. Some have started, some are on the verge of starting, and this excludes any it's called donation. This excludes grants, right? This excludes any grants. This is the loans portion I speak about that we have to pay back. So it's $1.3 billion And then there's another 528 that we are already involved in activity. And we need an account and an update for that as well. So, and again, we've also formed the Blue Green Bank, which is another source of financing. Another source of financing. So you have all the financing from the international markets. You have the Green Climate Fund. Then you have the Blue Green Bank. And so for now, we have $3 billion of climate financing. We support it. It is a long-term necessity for our country. Give an account of how we are, as a government, you are going to spend this money. And I must conclude now by sharing my disappointment then, after having this information before us here today, that you would offer an industry that has been devastated by a natural disaster. That's right. $500,000. That's right. That not has been invested by the government, but has been donated by another bank. So I think the government has a lot to answer to and to respond to as related to put in context the quantum of money that has been borrowed, the time frame it has been borrowed in, and what it would be used to do in the best interest of building resilience against climate change in Barbados. Thank you. Well said, Ralph.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. And this is an excellent opportunity to go on to Ms. Felicia Dujan, the UWI lecturer and one of the vice presidents of the Democratic Labour Party, after Senator Walters' presentation on climate resilience. She will be speaking on the current situation in the fishing industry and government's responses there.
Good
Mr.
morning.
John.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Barbadians. And I'm hoping that the fishing folk are listening to our press conference to hear what has been happening, the amount of money that has been borrowed on their behalf, because primarily coastal development has to deal with the fisher folk. The reality is that we are dealing with a government of delays and denial. Delays in policy development, delays in ensuring that various members of the society, various sectors, various policies are designed to protect citizens, to protect the fundamental rights of citizens, and the denial of accountability. This is the kind of government that we're dealing with right now. I have taken the time to speak with some of the fisher folk as to what has happened and what has transpired in the last 2 weeks. And we're seeing, of course, the denial that they should not be held accountable on what has been provided to the fisher folk. But on the basis of that, we are hoping that the minister responsible for that particular sector give us an account, a report on the total damage of that particular industry. It is important that we recognize that the fisher folks and the fishing industry is also part of our agricultural sector, and it is our duty to protect not only the livelihood of those individuals, but also our sector, our citizens. And it was very alarming that we heard the minister speaking that the increase of fish will not occur. But the reality is that we can't, I don't know where he gets his fish from. I don't know if he purchases fish itself. But the reality is that we may not feel the impact immediately. It will take a couple of weeks, perhaps a couple of months, as those fisher folks are still trying to recover from what they have endured. So we are hoping that the information that has been shared today, that the persons responsible, the government, that we know that there is factual evidence that that $1.3 billion that is being spent, hopefully we'll get some information on that, but that the persons within the sector, the citizens that you're borrowing on their behalf, that you take into consideration that it is your moral and ethical responsibility to do the right thing. And that is something that we need to speak quite often, that being in government is not only about the finances, but the ethical decisions that we make, doing the right thing.
Correct.
delaying processes, not taking in accountability, not taking in consideration transparency. We're seeing it in various sectors. We're seeing it in the health sector. We're seeing it in the lives of our children. We're seeing it in the delays in other sectors within our society. We need to hold those persons responsible, not only as citizens, but it is our duty, as I said before, to do so. We are hoping that the minister remembers that while they are going to honor our fisher folks, which is very important, we also have to compensate them. We are hoping that at some point that the minister or the ministers that are responsible will inform the fisher folk as to how much compensation and how that compensation will be dispersed. This is what we need to hear. We are hoping that they also take in consideration that these individuals will not be in their livelihood of fishing. Right now, we understand that, and they need the kind of intervention that is necessary. These are human lives that we're dealing with. And though that some persons may not recognize the importance of fisher folks within our society, there's a great history of the men and women that have developed this country because of that act of fishery. I also want to support the idea of having the shipbuilding program at the Samuel Jackson School, because I believe it's an important industry, it's an important area. And because of what has happened, we recognize that those industries, we need young persons within those fields. That the skill of shipbuilding is a dying skill. And it's also a lucrative skill. But we want to encourage persons, when I believe that the Ministry of Education should think very critically about it and ensure that these are areas that we can harness and perhaps develop our young persons within those fields. So regardless of this delays in administrative processes and policies, we are hoping that the government takes its responsibilities seriously. The denials, I think citizens are tired of those denials. One that they did not know, or one they did not take into consideration, and gaslighting and blaming everybody. But the persons that are being paid by taxpayers, it's your duty. You took an oath to protect the rights of all citizens. And we're going to hold you accountable to that. And we're going to ensure that we encourage you or remind you that it is your duty as a government to represent the interests of all citizens. And that when you are borrowing on our behalf, that you give us an account of what is transpiring and what is taking place. It is our responsibility, and it is also our democratic right. And let's not forget that. So I will hopefully, as I said before, we stand with the fisher folks, and we are hoping that they do get the compensation, because in the end, this is what we're fighting for.
Thank you very much, Ms. Juzal. We now move on to Neil Marshall, an attorney at law, and he'll be speaking to you on issues of labor and government.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, leader of the opposition and politically democratic party, members of the media assembly. And today I want to address the whole issue of what we call the dilution of the interests of labor across the entire spectrum of the workforce. And as we know, we have had a whole spate of industrial disputes and so on. The Minister of Labor sometimes purporting to intervene and to bring more confusion than is already there to understand of these labor issues. But we've seen really a diminution of the standards in employment in Barbados, and particularly standards of employment dealing to terms of contract, service, etc., facilities, etc. Now, government often leads the way in setting standards in anything, really, labor standards, and the private sector often takes its lead from government. Indeed, government is often seen as the benchmark for labor standards. I have been fortunate to be to see Barbados at a point in time when government is seen as a secondary source of premier employment, so that most persons coming out of school often look to the private sector as having the higher bar, and everyone was excited to go into the private sector. And of course, I was there under very, very progressive labor leaders that we've had in Barbados in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s, to see government overtake actually the private sector in terms of labor standards. Indeed. And so that government actually surpassed the private sector as being the prime institution where persons saw it as being desirable to be employed in the public sector. But what has happened now is that you've seen within very recent times a complete abdication of the responsibility of the labor leaders in Barbados. To the point now really there's only one labor leader of any note, and I'm not embarrassed to call his name, I'm proud to call his name Caswell Franklin, who has been at the forefront really of the labor movement. Yes. And he's been having some very serious pushback, no doubt. But you've gone to the point where government no longer leads as the premier institution in setting the benchmark and standards of labor. In fact, you have this vexing situation with public employees of these temporary contracts, and a series of temporary contracts depending on how they're drafted, but they run successively into one, into the other, and they very craftily put a hiatus between the individual contracts, maybe a 6-week or something like that, so you don't have a certain level of continuity, and which is very frustrating to employees. And where are the labor leaders, or the purported labor leaders, particularly those from the two largest unions in Barbados, that's the Barbados Workers Union and the NUPW? Where has the militancy and the activism gone out of these two premier labor institutions? So what you have now is a situation in government where employees are perpetually and permanently, it's an oxymoronic term, but permanent temporary contracts of service, where persons, and the reality is that no one can plan their lives on those temporary contracts. They're not, you can't approach financial institutions with a temporary contract of employment year to year or a 2-year at the maximum. They're not bankable. And that throws a lot of confusion into families in terms of obtaining mortgages, even things like long-term educational planning to help uplift themselves. So that is a very vexing situation that needs to be addressed. Again, I made the point that where government leads, the private sector tends to follow. So that where you have situations where the government has not been paying national insurance contributions for employees, particularly those temporary employees, and those persons, obviously when they're laid off, then they're in a quandary in terms of recovering money. But where government is taking that position, either the entirely paying or just simply not paying at all, you cannot then expect the private sector, even though they know better and have often, with their best efforts, tried to remain within the law in doing that, you cannot then expect to blame the private sector overly harshly when the lead is being set by the government. It is leadership and leadership at all levels that obviously come in terms of where others follow. And the government has been abdicating its responsibility, its statutory duties in many of these instances. And you're hearing nothing really the sort of activism that one would expect from the labor movement. Now, what has happened really is that because of the attitudes of the labor leaders in Barbados, what you have found is that industrial relations, which really deals with the relationship between employer and employee, and one expects it to be a harmonious relationship between those two entities, has given way really to a set of continuous litigation through the law courts, where persons believe that the industrial relation process is not working for them. They obviously resort to where they know best. As an attorney, I can tell you that there is a constant stream of persons rather having faith in the industrial relation process, have instead decided to place their faith in the law courts. And all that does is help to continue burden already overburdened legal system. Again, even the institutions of government, such as the Labor Department, which their primary role is to help regulate and set and enforce various labor standards across the workforce in Barbados, are actually overwhelmed, understaffed, and overwhelmed with continuous complaints of unfair practices by employers, and very particularly government as well. And we call obviously on the Minister of Labour, who has responsibility for that department, to ensure that that department has the resources, necessary resources in terms of officers and so on, are put at its disposal so that it can help to mediate in many of these labor disputes where persons who unfortunately haven't paid union dues, they get the type of representation that they expect. They very well need to seek about getting a refund on that particular score. But the Labor Department is under severe pressure. I've had continuous complaints from persons in there. And in fact, you have a situation where complaints referred to the Chief Labor Officer are now taking such an inordinate amount of time for either the conciliation process under the Employment Rights Act to take place, or if there's no conciliation between the employer and employee, for the referral to the Employment Rights Tribunal, that person is now opting to write the Chief Labor Officer telling them, I'm withdrawing my matter from you, and I'm proceeding to the law courts, provided it's within the statutory limitation period to do so. So persons are beginning to lose faith in the whole process, and it is very disconcerting where the industrial relations climate in Barbados is either being not attended to by those persons who have been engaged by workers to do so, and that's mainly the major trade unions, or those efforts are being suppressed and undermined. And it's only a matter of time, if Barbados is not careful, that will somehow explode in our faces. I think that Barbados at this juncture can ill afford to have not have good industrial relations. We know that the tourism industry, being the leading industry in Barbados, is quite prone and susceptible to that type of action as well. Previously, when sugar was king in Barbados, that is where industrial relations and terms of activism struck at that heart. But so we just simply call on the Minister of Labor to those labor leaders, particularly those within the government, to step up and to represent the people of Barbados. The Democratic Party stands very willing and always able to do so. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall. The press conference is now open to questions from members of the media. Remember, please state your name and the host you're representing.
Just announce that Senator Walters.
As Senator Walters had to leave, he has another appointment.
Thank you.
Paul Manzi from Nation News. Yeah. Good to finally meet you again. Just remember where you know me from. Based on what you outlined about the PAC, one would be hard pressed, again, based on your outline, to say that given the current compilation.
Compilation or composition?
Composition.
Composition.
Composition
Of the PAC.
Of the PAC.
Yes.
That the objective of oversight can get done. I mean, is that what essentially is that you're saying at this point?
Yes, that we are trying to do our work on a matter that has caught the interest of Barbadians, a matter that has spent $60+ million of Barbadian money, and Barbadians want answers to the questions. The Prime Minister herself wanted answers, and we have gone to the PAC, which is the legitimate body, to investigate the matter, and we've been frustrated. And I don't mind coming to the public and saying that. We have been frustrated by a section in the Act which says that all matters to be determined by the committee must go to a vote.
Well, that actually is going to bring me to our next question. I mean,
Yes, please.
Do we need to maybe have a change in the legislation that gives more authority to the chairman, who would most likely be the opposition?
For some, yes, Colvin. For some good reason, in 2003, they inserted that. Well, they passed that legislation because previously the PAC functioned according to the standing orders of the Parliament. But that piece of legislation has given a lot of power to the general membership, and as all Barbadians know and need to know, that the government members are in the overwhelming majority. If everything comes to a vote, we cannot win. We cannot win on partisan lines. So that the power that we thought we had as a chairman, apparently we don't have it. So I'm in there to be told by them what they want to discuss. They are coming in there and promoting the government's agenda, but the people have an agenda. And not only an agenda, but a purpose. And the purpose is to ensure that government spends the monies of the people prudently. And we are being frustrated in our effort to ensure that those monies were spent prudently. It's not right. What has happened is not right. But I believe there's a resolution.
And again, that
was your next question.
Yeah.
I read you know.
What's the plan of action from because of that?
The first part of the plan of action is to come here this morning and tell the people of this country what the government has done in relation to a legitimate process, a process in which the leader of the opposition, acting on behalf of the opposition and acting on behalf of the people, has the right to indicate and to determine what matters are right for investigation. This is the start of it. I want the people to know what has happened. The people must know. And real political power lies with the people. And let the people start sharpening their pens. If this government believes that it can suppress a legitimate exercise of inquiry, let the people start sharpening their pencils for the time that is coming inevitably. And I say, when I first raised this, I challenged the government to call an election to frustrate us. But they decided not to call an election to frustrate us. They decided to come in there and to frustrate us and decide and determine what is of prime importance. So there's a time coming, Colvin. There's a time coming.
Ricardo Roberts, Starcom Network. I know you started your press conference on the issue of crime
Yes.
I'm just curious, and I know you mentioned about having a commission set up to meet with the people and so on.
Yes.
In the interim, I'm just trying to find out what solutions can the opposition offer to the country or even to the government as to how to treat with this crime. We see in several countries, several initiatives have been put in place. Some would have had joint police military exercises. There were even instances where you see they put curfews in other jurisdictions as well. What in the interim, as you have this commission set up to go and speak to the people, what can you offer to the government as a solution? And the second question is, I know the Prime Minister would have also asked the country to go in prayer on Saturday. Does the opposition support that view, that position, and again, alternatives?
I looked at the composition of this table. We pray every day. We don't have to pause. We don't have to wait for a Prime Minister to tell us when to pray. I can guarantee you that every person at this table prays often. But look, solutions. I told the government about 2-3 years ago that there can be a military response, and you refer to it, joint police, BDF patrols, socio-economic response, a legislative response, and the socio-economic is long-term. And the other response, the cultural response, and the government has failed this country in terms of its cultural response because it's the government. And I heard Mr. Jordan being interviewed yesterday, and in a very good interview, the person asked him, but how can you defend the government, which has been at the center of the promotion of revelrous activity in this country, which has victimized young children, because government must now take responsibility for the fact that a lot of our young children have gone morally adrift. It is what they're hearing. This government has promoted revelry at the expense of the rights and the interests and the welfare of young children in this country. They've gone as far as the young children. But let me tell you what this government can do and what they have failed to do. They've been boasting about how they increased the number of judges. They increased the number of judges and have failed to provide the infrastructure in the courts that have allowed cases to move at a quicker pace. In other words, the transcription people, the clerical staff, they haven't increased them. And I want to give another solution to the government. If they want leadership on the issue, anti-gang legislation. The other countries have done it. We've had an attorney general plodding along for the last 6 years and has not thought to pass anti-gang legislation. It is known in this country that a lot of the crime is localized within gang activity. The logical thing to do is what Jamaica did, what Trinidad did, anti-gang legislation. They want me to tell them now what is anti-gang legislation. Tell them go and read. But tell the Attorney General to consider anti-gang legislation. It is logical. But they're sitting down and closing their eyes for 5 minutes and hoping for something. No, it makes me angry. It makes me angry. This is a lazy government. Very lazy and incompetent government. And they want us to tell them what are the solutions, but we are going to the people. We are humble enough to accept that we don't have all of the answers. And we are going and asking the people, give us your perspective. What are the causes? How does it affect you? And what do you think are the solutions? We don't have all of the solutions. We don't have them all. But we want to engage with the people. And this government comes and engages with the people when the crisis reaches its highest point. But they're up in Botanical Gardens. The Barbados Labour Party sponsored an event a few months ago. And there was a DJ in the Botanical Gardens standing over a 13-year-old girl who was lying on the stage and gyrating. The Barbados Labour Party sponsored that event. Now they want a 5-minute prayer. It's a good thing. But everybody at this table praying every day. A Prime Minister has never had to advise me to pray, nor this lady, nor this gentleman. We pray every day. Prayer for us is not some interlude, some remote interlude. We pray all the time. Pray all the time. all big questions don't have to come through me, so I ask some questions.
No, Ms. Dujon, also in terms of the, have you gotten any feedback in terms of the salvage effort thus far, in terms of how satisfied the fisher folk as it relates to that salvage effort? Are you getting any feedback along that line?
Yes, I have been speaking to some of the fisher folk. We do go back and ensure that we don't just start an advocacy and do not do a follow-up. So I think it's important that we still go back. In as much as we're seeing what is happening, some of the boats have been halted. There's still that concern as how do I move on from here? And how quickly will the government provide the kind of compensation or financial relief that is needed, critically needed, because people have to survive. It's obvious that the vessels have been damaged and they can't go out into the sea. So what are they surviving on? Which is really the question. And so it's really a matter of the government providing the kind of intervention as swiftly as possible. We do understand to this point, some of the fisher folk, they will have to take their own funding to restore their boats. For some of them, I think it will take them, I think it's a matter of them not, it's devastating for them because they don't know if the boat can actually be repaired. So that is another problem. How do you deal with that? This is somebody's entire livelihood. So how do you deal with what we would call human crisis right now at this point? Because there's a lot of other areas that is in despair with the crisis of crime, and now you're dealing with persons that have lost their livelihood within the society. And that is why it's important that the minister gave us a total report on the damage. We need to know what is happening. We need to know how much person's life have been affected. Because it's not just the fisher folk, the fishermen that go out there. We have the women that work in the field. We have other persons that buy the fish from the fisher folk and resell it. So all of these things that we need to understand, not only the financial aspect of it, but the humanitarian aspect that we'll deal with in terms of how do we cope as a society for those particular members of our society, that particular sector. So it is not something that will go away very quickly, and I'm glad that the minister finally came out. We were hoping that he would have given us a better account of what is happening. So a report and to allow persons and to communicate with the fisher folks so that at least there is some sense of hope that we will be coming in and stepping up and to provide some kind of compensation. But that is very important, that they need to be compensated. They need a bailout, as what we would say. They need some kind of bailout from the government. And a sensible and caring government will look to see that, these are people that we depend on. These are people that are part of our society that we need to help them out and not forget everything else that is happening. Because I know crop over is just around the corner. So people not remember that there are people in our society that are still struggling. These are fisher folk that still have to send their children to school in September. So these are the things that we really need. We have to see the humanitarian part of people within our society.
Final question from me, and this one will go to Mr. Marshall. You were speaking about the short-term contracts that is being introduced especially within the public sector. This is an issue that the union, at least I know of one union that has been on this issue for some time, as it relates to contracts and its impact on the NIS and so on. These persons being pretty much in limbo because they're not quite independent contractors, and they are still not quite employees either. So they are pretty much in a state of limbo. It seems as though that the only recourse is moral suasion at this point. As I said, I've been speaking about it for some point, at length for some point. Putting on your legal hat, is there anything else besides moral suasion that can be done to try to bring some sort of resolution to this issue?
Well, Mr. Mosley, law and morality and so on are not always comfortable bedfellows. The simple fact is that, speaking about moral suasion, let us remember that one of the leaders of the Barbados Workers Union is a legislator. So I don't know if you precisely government legislator. I don't know unless I would have to ask her if she can bring some sort of moral suasion upon her colleagues and the Prime Minister. But they're very much sat there. It is a situation that, in fact, let me just say, we tend to think of these temporary contracts as extending only to those new persons into the system. But indeed, what you're having is that many older persons who sometimes have left the service, or that they're dispensing with certain categories of workers and experience, are what we would call in Barbadian terms paid out, carried, or whatever, and then brought back in to do much of the same jobs on these same short-term contracts. And what that does sometimes is stop the upward mobility of persons within the service and so on, rather than the natural course of attrition. But you've asked me to put on, to try to look at a legal solution to a problem that really needs the attention of the government in a moral sense. That it's only fair that if you want to have a society and a workforce that is productive and it's progressive, that you provide the best, not only conditions for them, but the best security for them. Persons can't function effectively in a job not knowing whether or not tomorrow will be their last day. They cannot function effectively or optimally if they are unable to approach, for example, lending institutions and so on, to secure a mortgage, to get all the trappings and the things that we expect to our employment and our hard work will provide us in Barbados on the piece of the rock, if we use that term, where they are in these revolving doors of temporary contracts. They can't sit comfortable, you don't get the best out of them, and they are only there and given only so much as is required until the next opportunity presents itself. It also has a very insidious motive behind it. It forces our public servants, who are really the guardians of this society in terms of good governance and administration. It puts them in a compromising position where they are often finding themselves having to do the bidding of the government, let me use that term broadly, sometimes in things that they know to be not in the best interest of the people of Barbados. And we have many categories of workers, of public servants who have to be insulated from that type of influence. Judges are one example. The DPP is another example. Auditor General is another example. So that you're getting in Barbados an environment where these temporary contracts and the specter of continued employment are hanging over the heads of many senior public servants. The sort of policies are about to come down if they fail to comply. If they fail to comply, let me say, the public service in Barbados, people in Barbados who are public service have a serious debt of gratitude. Right. They have guarded and shielded us. In fact, the public service in Barbados is being seen as one of the premier civil services within the entire Tropic Commonwealth. Yes. And we must be very, very careful how we treat our public servants.
Correct.
Least we find ourselves in a situation where bad administration and maladministration takes over in Barbados, leading to anarchy.
Any more questions?
You are the commissioner.
This lady has a question.
This question, Jesse Robinson here from News on the Go. This question is for Shaquani Hunt. I know you are seeing the increase in crime is linked to children not being proactive enough and spending a lot of time on their devices. Also, you are asking parents to monitor the time the children would spend on the devices. Everything of like an iceberg analogy. On the surface level, what we would see is the result, but what we don't see would be the psychological and cultural influences. So my question to you would be, how can we have a comprehensive type thing that we could really go in depth to find out why this is occurring and what is it?
Okay, thank you very much. That's an excellent question. The first thing they need to do is clear more counselors in school. I've spoken about this previously. Primary schools, unless they change it last time I spoke about it, they have one counselor for every 4 primary schools. That is an issue. You need to get more counselors. I don't know if you need to implement a program where persons studying certain courses get a additional discount because they are studying courses that are a necessity to the country of Barbados. So courses like our degrees like social work and counselors and psychiatrists, we need an influx in that in Barbadian society. I'm saying that because I can see from just me observing, but we need professionals to do this assessment because this is not something that can be done overnight. This is going to be done over a period of time because we're talking about something that's impacting children from inception and reception to leaving secondary school. To analyze data as wide as that means we need to start a study from now to monitor the children currently in reception to see what happens at 11 plus, what happens when they're leaving school, what is the outcome. We have too many children going into school normal, or what we will consider to be the norm, coming out with violent tendencies, coming out no CSCs, no ability to read, no ability to write, no ability to count. Basic necessities they need to operate in the daily, the day-to-day in Barbadian society, and we're saying that is okay. That cannot be okay. How are you expecting them to function in society if they can't do the basics? You know how frustrating it is for a person who cannot read when you give them a form to fill out to get a job? They get frustrated, they get angry. They sometimes speak to you, if you make them feel comfortable, they speak to you at the side to let you know, well, I don't actually know how to read, so I can't actually spell. Can you write down my address for me? Can you write down my name for me? So how are we expecting them to function in a day-to-day job if they can't do the basics? And we're allowing them to leave school like that? It should not matter that a person stops down. What is the greatest point that we need to focus on is that the person can read and they can write and they can count. And they can do those 3 things, they can survive in Barbadian society and any society because they can handle themselves. When we do not follow the rules, when we do not follow the needs of society, because society is asking for this, parents are asking for assistance, they don't know what's going on with the children are just angry. The teachers are saying the children are just angry. That means that we need to do more. I heard guidance counselors say that it is hard trying to get back to one school, 3 months pass, and the child may not be at the school anymore. The problem has worsened. So they need assistance. And I'm not saying that they're doing a bad job, they're just not able to complete the job because they're spread too thin. And we need to do more. And by doing more, we need to have incentives to students to go into these programs. Even if people want to retrain, you may be a person who studied a different career path and you want to go back because you realize that Barbados has this need and you want to help the Barbadian society. I think we need to speak to UWI, we need to speak to BCC and get an initiative in place to assess this need for Barbadians.
Let's define this. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us for this press conference hosted by Mr. Ralph Thorne K.C. MP and political leader of the Democratic Labour Party. Thank you to the media people for coming this morning. Thank you very much and have a good day.
It's a couple of things.